The forgotten colony, the alarm rang at 3 in the morning. Park Tae-ho woke up from his small bed in the command building and ran to the communication room. His heart was beating fast. Alarms never rang at this hour unless something was very wrong. Lieutenant Kim Soo-bin was already there. She stood in front of the large screen with her face pale and her hands shaking. When Tae-ho entered the room, she turned to look at him. Her eyes were filled with fear. "Commander," she said quietly, "you need to see this." Tae-ho walked to the screen and looked at the data. His blood went cold. 47 ships were moving toward their moon. They were not human ships. The computer identified them as Veth Dominion vessels. The Veth. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They were an ancient empire that had ruled the outer regions of space for thousands of years. They were cruel and powerful. They saw other species as nothing more than slaves and resources. Worlds that refused to surrender were destroyed completely, and now they were coming here. To New Haven. New Haven was a small mining colony on the moon called Kappa 7. It was far from Earth, forgotten by most people back home. 3,000 colonists lived here. They were miners, engineers, doctors, teachers, and their families. They had come here 40 years ago to dig rare minerals from the ground. Minerals that helped build the engines for starships. Nobody expected the Veth to find them. Nobody expected anything to happen here at all. How long until they arrive? Tae-ho asked. Soo-bin checked the calculations. 6 days, Commander. 6 days. Tae-ho closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The nearest Earth military base was 3 weeks away. Even if he sent a distress signal right now, help would not arrive in time. "Send the signal anyway," he said. "Earth needs to know." Soo-bin nodded and began working on the transmission. Tae-ho watched her for a moment, then turned and walked out of the room. He needed to think. He needed a plan. The colony was waking up now. People were coming out of their homes, confused and scared. They had heard the alarm. They wanted answers. Tae-ho climbed onto a platform in the center of the main dome. He looked at the crowd gathering below him. He saw miners still covered in dust from yesterday's work. He saw mothers holding their children close. He saw old men and women who had spent their whole lives building this place. These were his people. He was responsible for them. "Listen to me," he said loudly. The crowd went silent. "I will not lie to you. An enemy fleet is coming. The Veth Dominion. They will be here in 6 days. Fear spread through the crowd like a wave. Some people cried out. Others held each other tightly. A few tried to run, though there was nowhere to go. Tae-ho raised his hand for silence. "I know you are scared. I am scared too. But we have a choice to make. We can give up and wait for them to take us. Or we can fight." An old miner in the front row spoke up. His name was Baek Dong-woo, and he had been the chief engineer of the colony for 20 years. "Fight with what, Commander? We have no weapons. No ships. We are miners, not soldiers." "Then we will become soldiers," Tae-ho said firmly. "We have mining lasers. We have explosives for breaking rock. We have drills and heavy equipment. We have tunnels that go deep into this moon. And we have 6 days." He looked around at the faces staring at him. "I am not asking you to win. I am asking you to make them pay for every inch of ground. I am asking you to show them that humans do not surrender. I am asking you to fight for your families, your homes, and your lives." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Dong-woo stepped forward. The old engineer's face was hard and determined. "Tell me what you need built, Commander. I will build it." One by one, others stepped forward too. Dr. Lee Yuna, the chief medical officer, volunteered to set up emergency hospitals underground. Architect Shinbi Ora offered to map out defensive positions in the tunnel network. Sergeant Yoon Jae-soon, the only active military person on the colony, promised to train anyone willing to learn. And young Choi Hana, a 22-year-old technical specialist who had never held a weapon in her life, raised her hand. "I can modify the mining lasers," she said. "Make them stronger. Turn them into guns that can shoot at ships in orbit." Taeho felt something warm growing in his chest. It was pride. These people were not warriors. They were ordinary humans, living ordinary lives. But when faced with death, they chose to stand and fight. "We have 6 days," Taeho said again. "Let us make them count." The work began immediately. All across the colony, people started preparing for war. Miners carried heavy equipment to the surface and helped Hana build weapon platforms. Engineers welded metal plates together to create barriers and shields. Doctors moved medical supplies into the underground tunnels where they would be safe from bombs. Children helped too. They carried water and food to the workers. They memorized the maps of the tunnels so they could guide people to safety. They learned basic first aid from Dr. Yuna. Even the oldest colonists refused to sit and wait. Grandmother Anne, who was 87 years old, spent hours cooking meals for the workers. Grandfather Wang, a retired engineer, helped design the defensive turrets with shaking hands but a sharp mind. On the 3rd day, a message came from the Veth fleet. The face of Lord Executor Primarch Volan appeared on the screen. He was tall and terrifying, with gray skin and eyes that glowed red. His voice was cold like ice. "Humans of the mining colony," he said, "you have been chosen to serve the Veth Dominion. Surrender now, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed." The whole colony watched the message in silence. Fear hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Tae-Ho stepped forward and pressed the reply button. He looked directly at the screen. "My name is Park Tae-Ho," he said calmly, "Commander of New Haven Colony. I have a message for you, Lord Volan." He paused for a moment, then spoke 3 words that would echo across the galaxy. "Come and take us." The transmission ended. The colonists stared at their commander in shock. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined in. Soon the whole dome was filled with cheering. They were still afraid. They knew they would probably die. But in that moment, they were not slaves waiting for chains. They were humans. And humans do not kneel. 3 more days remained. 6 days of defiance. The 4th day began with fire in the sky. Choi Hana looked up through the glass dome and saw the lights of the Veth scout ships entering orbit. 3 vessels, each one bigger than the entire colony. They circled the moon like hungry wolves watching their prey. Hana wiped the sweat from her forehead and returned to her work. She had not slept in 2 days. Her eyes were red and her hands were covered in burns from welding. But she did not stop. She could not stop. The mining lasers were never meant to be weapons. They were designed to cut through rock and metal, not to fight starships. But Hana was clever. She had studied engineering since she was a child. She understood how machines worked. She had taken apart 12 laser units and rebuilt them into something new. Each one was now powerful enough to punch through ship armor. She had connected them to tracking computers that could follow moving targets in space. She had created an orbital defense system from nothing but mining equipment and determination. "Is it ready?" Commander Taeho asked, walking up behind her. Hana nodded slowly. "I think so. I have never tested weapons like these before. I do not know if they will work." Taeho put his hand on her shoulder. "You have done more than anyone could ask, Hana. Now we find out if the Veth bleed." He turned to Lieutenant Subin. "Power up the defense grid." Across the colony surface, 12 weapon platforms came to life. Their barrels pointed upward at the circling ships. Computers locked onto targets. Power hummed through cables and circuits. The Veth did not expect resistance. They were used to fear and surrender. They moved closer, preparing to scan the colony and count their new slaves. "Fire," Tejo said quietly. Beams of blue light shot into the sky. They moved faster than the eye could follow. The first Veth scout ship exploded in a ball of flame. The second one tried to turn away, but was hit 3 times in its engine section. It broke apart and fell toward the moon's surface in burning pieces. The third ship managed to escape. It fled back toward the main fleet, damaged and leaking smoke. Its crew screamed warnings into their communication systems. The humans had weapons. The humans were fighting back. In the command center, the colonists watched in shocked silence. Then someone laughed. It was a wild, disbelieving laugh. Others joined in. They had destroyed 2 enemy ships. 2 ships from an empire that had never been defeated. Hana sat down on the ground and began to cry. She was exhausted and overwhelmed. She had never killed anyone before. She had never wanted to hurt anyone. But she had just saved her people, at least for a few more hours. Dr. Lee Yuna came and sat beside her. The doctor was kind and gentle. She put her arm around Hana and held her close. "You did what you had to do," Yuna said softly. "You protected us. That is nothing to be ashamed of." Hana wiped her tears and nodded. There was no time for grief. The main fleet would arrive soon, and they would be angry. On the 5th day, Sergeant Yoon Jae-sung gathered everyone who could hold a weapon. He had been training them for days now, but time was running out. He needed to prepare them for close combat. "The Veth soldiers are big," he explained, holding up a picture on a tablet. 8 feet tall, covered in armor that can stop most bullets. In an open field, they will crush us. The colonists looked at each other nervously. How could ordinary people fight monsters like that? Jae-sung smiled grimly. "But we are not fighting in an open field. We are fighting in our tunnels. Tunnels that humans built. Tunnels that are too small for Veth soldiers to move easily." He pulled up a map of the underground network. Miles of passages connected every part of the colony. Mining tunnels, storage rooms, emergency shelters. A maze of darkness and narrow spaces. "Down there, size does not matter," Jae-sung continued. "Down there, we know every corner, every shadow, every hiding place. We hit them and disappear. We make them afraid of the dark." Private Oh Jin-ho stepped forward. He was a young man, only 25 years old. He had worked in the mines since he was 18. He knew the tunnels better than anyone. "I can lead teams through the lower passages," Jin-ho said. "There are places where only one person can fit at a time. We can set traps there. Cave-ins, explosives, anything to slow them down." Jae-sung nodded approvingly. "Good. We need every advantage we can get." The colonists spent the rest of the day preparing the tunnels for war. They moved supplies underground. They set up hidden weapon stations. They placed explosives at key points. They turned their home into a fortress. Architect Shin Baora worked without rest, drawing maps and planning escape routes. She knew every building in the colony because she had helped design them. Now, she was using that knowledge to save lives. "If they break through the eastern dome, fall back to Tunnel 7, she told a group of defenders. "If they reach the central plaza, use Route 12 to get underground. Never let them trap you. Always have a way out." On the morning of the 6th day, the sky turned dark. The main Veth fleet had arrived. 44 warships blocked out the stars. Each one was massive, covered in weapons and armor. They formed a ring around the small moon, surrounding it completely. Lord Valen's face appeared on every screen in the colony. His red eyes burned with anger. "You destroyed 2 of my ships," he said slowly. "You killed my soldiers. You insulted the Dominion with your foolish defiance." He leaned closer to the camera. "Now, I will teach you the price of resistance." I will burn your colony to ash. I will drag your survivors into slavery. And I will make sure the galaxy knows what happens to those who dare to fight the Veth." The transmission ended. Commander Tejo looked at his people. They were scared. They knew that this was probably the end. But they stood tall. They did not run or cry. "Everyone underground," Tejo ordered. "Leave the surface defenses on automatic. We make our stand in the tunnels." The colonists moved quickly and quietly into the darkness below. Families held hands. Friends stayed close together. Old people helped young people. Young people carried the children. Dr. Yuna was the last to go down. She stood at the entrance of the main tunnel and looked back at the colony she had called home for 15 years. The domes, the gardens, the schools and hospitals. "Goodbye," she whispered. Then she turned and walked into the darkness. Above them, the bombardment began. Fire rained from the sky. The battle for New Haven had started. The last stand, the ground shook as bombs fell from the sky. Dust and rocks fell from the tunnel ceiling. Children screamed and cried. Mothers held them close and whispered words of comfort. But everyone knew the truth. Death was falling on them like rain. Commander Tejo stood in the main underground command center. Screens showed images from cameras on the surface. He watched as the beautiful domes of New Haven cracked and burned. Glass shattered. Metal melted. Gardens that colonists had spent years growing turned to ash in seconds. Hana's automated defense turrets were still firing. They shot beam after beam at the enemy ships. Most shots missed or bounced off the thick armor, but a few hit their targets. A Veth destroyer lost one of its engines. A cruiser caught fire on its left side. "They are landing troops," Lieutenant Subin reported. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "Dropships coming down near the eastern dome." Tejo nodded. He had expected this. The Veth would not be satisfied with bombing from space. They wanted to capture the colonists alive. Slaves were valuable to them. "Tell Sergeant Jason to prepare the welcome," Tejo said. Deep in the tunnels, Jason gathered his fighters. They were not soldiers. They were miners, teachers, engineers, and farmers. But they had trained hard for the past 6 days. They knew how to shoot. They knew how to hide. They knew how to fight dirty. "Remember," Jason told them, "do not try to be heroes. Hit them fast, then disappear into the tunnels. Make them chase you. Make them scared. Make them bleed." The Veth dropships landed on the burning surface. Doors opened and soldiers poured out. They were huge creatures, 8 feet tall with gray skin and glowing eyes. They wore black armor that covered their whole bodies. They carried weapons that could tear a human apart with one shot. There were thousands of them. The first Veth squads entered the tunnels through broken dome sections. They moved confidently, expecting to find frightened civilians hiding in corners. Instead, they found darkness and silence. Private Ojinho waited in a side passage. He held a mining laser in his hands. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. He had never killed anyone before. He was just a miner, just a normal person, but his family was hiding deeper in the tunnels. His mother, his little sister. If the Veth got past him, they would take everyone he loved. He heard heavy footsteps approaching. The Veth soldiers made a lot of noise when they walked. Their armor clanked against the stone walls. Jin-Ho took a deep breath. He stepped out of his hiding spot and fired. The beam hit the first Veth soldier in the chest. The alien fell backward with a scream. The others turned toward Jinho, raising their weapons, but Jinho was already running. He knew these tunnels. He had walked them 1,000 times. He ducked into a narrow passage that was too small for the Veth to follow. Their angry shouts echoed behind him. All across the underground network, similar fights were happening. Colonists attacked from shadows, then vanished into the maze of tunnels. The Veth soldiers were strong and well armed, but they were lost. Every corner looked the same. Every passage led to another passage, and the humans kept coming. They came from above, from below, from the sides. They used mining explosives to collapse tunnels on top of Veth squads. They used industrial chemicals to create poison clouds. They used anything they could find. Dr. Yuna worked in a makeshift hospital deep underground. Wounded colonists were brought to her every hour. She had very limited supplies. She had no proper equipment. But she did everything she could. An old miner named Grandfather Wang was carried in with burns covering half his body. He had stayed behind to operate a defense turret until the last moment. Yuna cleaned his wounds and wrapped them in bandages. He would probably not survive, but she refused to give up on anyone. "How bad is it, doctor?" Wang asked weakly. Yuna forced a smile. "You will be fine. You are too stubborn to die." Wang laughed, then coughed painfully. "I got 3 of them before they got me. 3 giant aliens. Not bad for an old man." He closed his eyes and drifted into unconsciousness. Yuna watched him for a moment, then moved to the next patient. There was no time to rest, no time to grieve. On the second day of fighting, the Veth broke through to the central shelter. 100 soldiers stormed into the large cave where many families were hiding. Commander Taeho was there with the last group of defenders. They formed a line in front of the civilians, weapons raised. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. "Hold the line," Taeho said quietly. "Give them time to escape through the back tunnels." The Veth commander laughed. He was a massive creature, taller than the others. His armor was decorated with symbols of rank. "Foolish humans," he said in broken English. "You cannot win. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick." Taeho raised his weapon. "We are not interested in quick deaths. Are you?" The fighting was brutal and short. The colonists fired everything they had at the Veth soldiers. Many aliens fell, but more kept coming. Defenders died one by one, but behind them, families escaped through narrow passages. Children ran on small legs, guided by older siblings. Mothers carried babies in their arms. Biora led them through routes she had memorized, always one step ahead of the enemy. Taeho took a hit to his shoulder. The pain was terrible, but he kept fighting. He saw Subin fall beside him, her leg badly wounded. He dragged her behind a rock and kept shooting. Then, suddenly, it was over. The remaining Veth retreated. They had lost too many soldiers. The humans had held the line long enough. Taeho slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his shoulder. Around him, the bodies of friends and enemies lay mixed together. "How many did we lose?" he asked weakly. Subin checked her communicator with shaking hands. "At least 200 dead. Many more wounded. But the families escaped. They are safe in the deep tunnels." Taeho closed his eyes. 200. 200 people who had trusted him. 200 lives lost, but 1,800 others were still alive. Still fighting. Still refusing to surrender. On the surface, Lord Volun raged at his commanders. How was this possible? 3,000 primitive miners were holding off the greatest military force in the galaxy. His soldiers were dying in dark tunnels, killed by workers with homemade weapons. "Bring more troops," he ordered. "Flood those tunnels with soldiers. I want every human captured or killed by tomorrow." But tomorrow would bring something that Lord Volun never expected. Tomorrow. The stars would burn. Deep in the tunnels. A young communications officer picked up a strange signal. She ran to find Commander Taeho, who was having his wounds treated by Dr. Yuna. "Commander!" she shouted. "Ships! Human ships! They are coming out of warp!" Taeho looked up, hardly daring to believe. How many? The officer checked her equipment again. Her eyes went wide. Over 100, sir. It is the whole Earth fleet. For the first time in days, Commander Park Tae-ho smiled. Help had finally arrived. Earth Answers Admiral Kwon Hae-jin stood on the bridge of the USN Defiance. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had served in the Earth Navy for 35 years. She had fought pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species. But she had never faced anything like this. Through the main window, she could see the Veth fleet. 44 massive warships surrounded the small moon of Kappa 7. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy. Their dark shapes blocked out the stars. Behind, Hae-jin stood the largest human armada ever assembled outside the solar system. 112 warships had come from every corner of human space. Battlecruisers with heavy armor and powerful guns. Aircraft carriers filled with fighter squadrons. Fast destroyers built for quick strikes. And at the center of the fleet, the experimental dreadnought Hammer of Terra, the most powerful weapon humanity had ever created. Admiral, her first officer reported, "The Veth are turning to face us." They seemed confused. Hae-jin nodded slowly. She understood their confusion. The Veth had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. No species had ever challenged them. No empire had ever dared to fight them directly. And now, a young species from a small blue planet was bringing war to their doorstep. "Open a channel to the fleet," Hae-jin ordered. Her communication officer pressed several buttons. "Channel open, Admiral. All ships can hear you." Hae-jin took a deep breath and began to speak. "This is Admiral Kwon Hae-jin of the United Earth Navy. 12 days ago, we received a distress call from New Haven Colony. 3,000 civilians were under attack by the Veth Dominion." She paused, letting her words sink in. 3,000 civilians. Miners, farmers, teachers, families. They had no warships. They had no military training. They had nothing but courage and determination. Her voice grew stronger. For 12 days, they held the line. They fought with mining equipment and homemade weapons. They refused to surrender. They refused to kneel. They showed the Veth what humans are made of. The bridge crew listened in silence. Many had tears in their eyes. "Now, it is our turn," Hae-jin continued. "Now we show the galaxy what happens when Earth sends its fleet. Now we teach the Veth that human lives have a price. And that price is higher than they can afford to pay." She turned to her tactical officer. "All ships, weapons free. Engage the enemy." The battle began. Captain No Gi-hwan commanded the destroyer squadron from his ship, the Soul's Pride. He was young for a captain, only 32 years old. But he was brave and skilled. "Follow my lead," he told his squadron. "We go straight through their formation. Hit their engines and keep moving." 6 destroyers accelerated toward the Veth fleet. They were smaller than the enemy ships, but much faster. They weaved between plasma bolts and missile attacks. Their guns blazed constantly, firing at any target they could hit. Ji-hwan's ship took several hits. Alarms rang throughout the bridge. Crew members shouted damage reports. But the Soul's Pride kept flying, kept fighting. "Target that cruiser's reactor," Ji-hwan ordered. Full power to forward guns. The destroyer's main weapons fired. Bright beams cut through space and struck the Veth cruiser's back section. The enemy ship exploded from inside, breaking into 1,000 burning pieces. Commander Lim Yunbai watched the battle from the bridge of the aircraft carrier Indomitable. Her ship carried 200 fighter craft, each one piloted by the best pilots in the Earth Navy. "Launch all squadrons," she ordered. "I want those Veth ships covered in fighters like bees on honey." Fighters poured from the carrier's launch base. They formed into attack groups and flew toward the enemy fleet. The Veth point defense guns tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. The fighters swarmed around the Veth battleships. They fired missiles at gun turrets and sensor arrays. They dodged and twisted through enemy fire. Some were destroyed, but others took their place immediately. Lord Volan watched the battle from his flagship with growing horror. This was impossible. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be a minor species, barely capable of interstellar travel. Where had this fleet come from? All ships, concentrate fire on the large vessel, he ordered, pointing at the Hammer of Terra. Destroy their biggest ship, and they will break. 20 Veth warships turned their weapons toward the dreadnought. Thousands of plasma bolts flew across space. Missiles launched in great waves. The attack would have destroyed any normal ship, but the Hammer of Terra was not a normal ship. Its shields absorbed the first wave of fire. Its armor held against the second wave, and then it fired back. The main weapon of the Hammer of Terra was classified at the highest levels. Only a few people in the entire Earth government knew how it worked. It required the power output of a small star to operate. It had never been tested in actual combat until now. A beam of concentrated antimatter shot from the dreadnought's front section. It was so bright that cameras automatically darkened to protect viewers' eyes. It crossed the distance between ships in less than a second. 3 Veth battleships were in its path. They simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. They were there one moment and gone the next, converted instantly into pure energy. For a moment, both fleets stopped fighting. Everyone stared at the empty space where 3 massive warships had been. Admiral Hygiene smiled coldly. Let them see what we can do. Let them understand. The battle continued for 3 more hours. The Veth fought hard. They were warriors who had never known defeat. They refused to run, but the humans were fighting for something more than victory. They were fighting for 3,000 people trapped underground on a small moon. They were fighting to prove that humanity would never abandon its own. One by one, the Veth ships fell. Some were destroyed completely. Others were crippled and left drifting. A few managed to escape into warp space, carrying stories of this terrible day back to the Dominion. Lord Volan's flagship was surrounded by human ships. Its weapons were destroyed. Its engines were dead. It hung in space like a wounded animal. Lord Volan, Admiral Hygiene's voice came through the communication system. Your fleet is destroyed. Your invasion has failed. Surrender, and your crew will be treated as prisoners of war. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Volan's face appeared on the screen. His red eyes were filled with hate and disbelief. How? He demanded. How did you get here so fast? Our intelligence said your nearest base was weeks away. Hygiene leaned forward. You made a mistake, Lord Volan. You thought we were weak because we are young. You thought we would not fight for a small colony on a forgotten moon. She shook her head slowly. Every human life matters to us. Every single one. When you attacked New Haven, you did not attack 3,000 miners. You attacked Earth. You attacked humanity. And humanity answers. Volan's flagship tried to fire one last weapon at the Defiance, but its systems were too damaged. The attempt failed. This is not over, Volan hissed. The Dominion will send 1,000 fleets. We will burn your worlds. We will— Enough, Hygiene interrupted. Take him alive. He has information we need. Marine boarding ships flew toward the crippled flagship. The battle was over. Above the scarred moon of Kappa 7, human ships gathered in formation. Their lights shone like new stars. For the first time in days, the sky over New Haven was safe. Underground, the colonists received the news. Cheering echoed through the tunnels. People hugged each other and cried with joy. Commander Taiho, wounded but alive, whispered a single word. Finally. The stars remember, the first shuttle landed on the burned surface of New Haven at noon. Its doors opened, and Admiral Quan Haijin stepped out into the smoke and ash. Behind her came medics, engineers, and soldiers carrying supplies. The colony was destroyed. The beautiful glass domes were shattered. The gardens were gone. Buildings had collapsed into piles of twisted metal and broken stone. Fires still burned in some areas, sending dark smoke into the gray sky. But the tunnels were intact. And in those tunnels, 2,847 people were still alive. Admiral Haijin walked toward the main tunnel entrance. Her boots crunched on broken glass and scorched earth. She had seen many battlefields in her long career. She had witnessed destruction and death on dozens of worlds. But this place was different. This place was a miracle. Commander Park Tae-ho emerged from the tunnel first. He was pale and thin, with bandages covering his shoulder and arm. He had not slept in days. He could barely stand, but when he saw the Admiral, he straightened his back and saluted. "Admiral Quan," he said formally. "Commander Tae-ho of New Haven Colony reporting." "We held the line, ma'am." Haijin looked at him for a long moment. Then she returned his salute with perfect military precision. "You did more than hold it, Commander," she said quietly. "You showed the entire galaxy what humans can do." Behind Tae-ho, the colonists began to emerge from the tunnels. They came out slowly, blinking in the light. Some were injured. Some were crying. All of them were exhausted beyond words, but they were alive. Against all odds, against the most powerful empire in the galaxy, they had survived. Dr. Lee Yuna was helping a wounded miner walk. Her white medical coat was stained with blood and dirt. She had not changed her clothes in 4 days. She had saved more than 200 lives with limited supplies and no proper equipment. Choi Hana came out supporting Chief Engineer Dongwoo. The old man was weak, but his eyes were bright with pride. Hana's makeshift orbital defense system had destroyed 9 enemy ships during the battle. She was already thinking about improvements. Private Oh Jin-ho walked with Sergeant Jae-sung. The young miner had led his team through 47 ambush attacks during the tunnel fighting. He had killed more enemy soldiers than anyone could count. He had become a warrior to protect his family. Architect Shin Beora guided the last group of families out of the tunnels. Every single evacuation route she had designed had worked perfectly. Not a single family had been trapped or captured. Admiral Haijin watched them all emerge. These ordinary people, these miners and doctors and engineers, these grandparents and children, they had done the impossible. "Set up medical stations," she ordered her officers. "I want every colonist examined and treated. Bring down food and water from the fleet, and start clearing the surface for reconstruction." She turned back to Tae-ho. "You need to rest, Commander. You have done enough." Tae-ho shook his head. "With respect, Admiral, I will rest when my people are safe. All of them." Haijin smiled slightly. She understood. She would do the same. Over the next few hours, shuttles flew back and forth between the fleet and the surface. Medical teams set up field hospitals. Engineers began examining the damage. Soldiers stood guard against any remaining Veth forces hiding on the moon. The colonists were fed their first real meal in days. Children ate cookies that fleet cooks had made especially for them. Adults drank hot soup and real coffee. Some people laughed. Some cried. Many did both. That evening, Admiral Haijin gathered everyone for a brief ceremony. She stood on a platform made of broken equipment, looking out at the crowd of survivors and rescuers. "What happened here will not be forgotten," she said. "The Veth Dominion has ruled this region of space for 3,000 years. No species has ever successfully resisted them. Until now." She looked at the colonists, at their tired faces and wounded bodies. at the determination still burning in their eyes. You were not soldiers. You were not warriors. You were ordinary people living ordinary lives. And when monsters came to take everything from you, you stood up and fought back. Her voice grew stronger. The news of what happened here is spreading across the galaxy right now. Other species are hearing about the miners who held off an empire, about the humans who refused to kneel, about the tiny colony that shook the stars. She paused for a moment. The Veth will come back. They will bring more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. They will try to make us pay for this day. And we will be ready for them, because now they know something they did not know before. They know that humans fight for each other. They know that we do not abandon our own. They know that every attack on human lives will be answered with the full force of Earth. She raised her hand in a salute. To the defenders of New Haven, to the living and the dead, to every person who refused to surrender. You have made humanity proud. The crowd cheered. Fleet sailors and colonists stood side by side, united by blood and fire. Later that night, Admiral Hyjin met privately with Commander Taeho and his senior staff. They needed to discuss the future. The Veth will definitely attack again, Hyjin explained. Our intelligence suggests they are mobilizing their core fleets. 100 worlds have pledged ships and soldiers to their cause. This war is just beginning. Taeho nodded slowly. He had expected this. Then we need to prepare, he said. Not just here, but everywhere. Every colony needs defenses. Every civilian needs training. That is already being arranged, Hyjin replied. The Earth Council has declared full military mobilization. Every shipyard is building new warships. Every academy is training new officers. We are going to need every advantage we can get. Hana spoke up. I have been studying the Veth weapons we captured. Their technology is advanced, but not perfect. I think I can design countermeasures. Maybe even improve our own weapons based on their designs. Do it, Hyjin said immediately. I will have you transferred to the main research facility on Earth. We need minds like yours. Jinho raised his hand shyly. I want to join the Marines, Admiral. Admiral, I want to keep fighting. Hyjin looked at the young man who had been a miner just 2 weeks ago. You have already proven yourself, Private. I will personally recommend you for advanced training. Dr. Yuna spoke last. The wounded need proper hospitals. And we need better combat medical procedures. Too many people died who could have been saved. Submit a proposal, Hyjin told her. We will implement it across all military units. The meeting continued for hours. Plans were made. Resources were allocated. The foundations of a galaxy-spanning war were laid in a broken room on a burned moon. When it was over, Taeho walked outside alone. He looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Veth Dominion was preparing for revenge. Somewhere out there, other species were watching and waiting to see what would happen. He thought about the people he had lost. The 200 colonists who had died defending their home. The families who would never be whole again. The friends he would never see dot, but he also thought about the people he had saved. The children who would grow up free. The families who would rebuild their lives. The hope that had been kindled in the darkness. Admiral Hyjin came and stood beside him. What are you thinking about, Commander? She asked. Taeho was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. I am thinking about fire, he said. About how a single spark can start a flame that burns across the world. We started something here, Admiral. Admiral, something that cannot be stopped. Hyjin nodded. Yes, we did. The question is, are we ready for what comes next? Taeho looked back at the colonists. At Hana already drawing weapon designs in the dirt. At Jinho practicing combat moves with marine instructors. and Dr. Yuna organizing medical supplies with fierce efficiency. "I think we are," he said. "I think we were always ready. We just did not know it yet." Above them, the human fleet hung in orbit. 112 ships, lights shining like new stars. A promise to the galaxy that humanity had arrived, and humanity would not be denied. Years later, when historians wrote about the beginning of the human ascendancy, they always started with New Haven, not because it was the greatest battle, not because it was the most important victory, but because it was the moment when humanity discovered something the galaxy had forgotten: that courage. Once ignited, spreads like fire across the void, and humans have always been very, very good at burning bright. The stars would remember New Haven forever, and so would humanity.